with that confirmation of a quorum, I'm going to turn it over to our city manager, Greg Clifton, to do introductions for our presenters that will be happening today. And thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. Looks like we have had a 90-some% participation rate about with the committee members, which is wonderful with that type of commitment of meeting every single week before the holidays. So thank you, everyone, and I'll turn it off to Mr. Clifton. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Odegaard. Good afternoon, committee. Good afternoon, consultant team. Good afternoon, staff. I'm going to echo our chair's comments and offer up some very sincere thanks to this committee who has been getting at it weekly with long meetings and very thoughtful discussions. The presentations have been good. We will continue with one today. But I do want to thank you for your continued time, commitment, engagement, involvement, so important to this community. Last week at this time, I introduced Sarah Dar, who directs our housing team. Our housing team resides within our community development division at the city. They are a big part of that division, and they provide multiple services and functions. Sarah, very good to see you. Before I turn it over to you to introduce your fellow colleagues and let you get right into the rest of the program, I understand today will be a lot of Q&A from the presentation last time. I want to congratulate you and your team because on Tuesday night of this week, the 10-year housing plan, of which we are all acquainted with at this juncture, was formally adopted by the City Council, and it was done so with enthusiasm. So that was a big hurdle and a lot of work that lies ahead, yes, but the template has been cast in this, if you will. So thank you for getting that 10-year plan across the finish line. Congratulations to you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Greg. On behalf of actually all of our staff, it was quite a lift. It took us just a year to get that done. And so council had said 9 months. We had the draft done in 9 months. And so we're happy to be able to deliver that for council. Thank you so much. I'm joined today by Justina Costa, who is the Assistant Director of our Community Housing Programs. On one side of the house, there she is. We're here to answer your questions. We're going to do the best that we can, but we did leave off with 2 questions last time. And so I have a very short, it's nothing like last week, I promise you, presentation to answer at least one of those questions. So let me figure out how to switch that. There we go. Question we were asked last time is how much money does housing, it's a department, but we are actually a section, currently get annually to fund programs from the general fund? And I didn't think I wanted to come in and say that depends. It's not a great answer. So we did a 10-year perspective on this. And what you have in front of you is a chart of that 10-year perspective. You'll see that there are many years where we have not received funding from the general fund towards housing programs. That is not because council did not feel housing was a priority, but this is as we were coming out of the Great Recession. Prior to 2008, housing received between $150,000 and $250,000 a year. That went away with the Great Recession. Those monies were needed elsewhere to keep bare bones going. We're all familiar with what that situation looked like. So we started seeing general fund money restored again in 2018. Please notice that that looks like a lot of money, but the numbers on the left-hand side, I know my right from left, don't worry. On the left-hand side, go from 0 to 250. It's not millions of dollars. And you'll see, I'll explain what each of the items is. The big gray line right there is housing development opportunities. That's money allocated to be able to position us to take advantage of opportunities when developers propose partnerships or a piece of land may come available that's critical for housing, etc. So still not a bunch of money. COFEAH. I know, I didn't spell it out, but I'm going to explain it to you. That is City of Flagstaff Employer Assisted Housing Program. And we have a program. You'll see the numbers. It's small, but it is absolutely critical to our recruitment and our retention efforts with city employees. And so that comes to us as one-time funding. Current employees are eligible to receive a small down payment match to theirs. I think it's $10,000. My mind is blanking on that. But it is a match and is available to City of Flagstaff employees. Going across, so you see that's where the monies are in 18, and in 19 you see the yellow appear. That was $17,000 deposited into the incentive fund. We do have a fund and a program that incentivizes the inclusion of affordable housing in both rental and ownership developments in our community. We've been living on a fund balance for quite a while. In 2008, of course, we saw construction drop off, so there wasn't a lot of demand as we were moving through those lean years. But there was some money allocated towards the incentive fund. In 2020, we saw money a little bit for housing development opportunities and employer assisted housing. In 2021, we actually called the accountant today and said, this makes no sense. I remember money. Well, we don't remember money. That is COVID. And that is when we were in the COVID recession and we were in an active recession plan approved by City Council, and we were pulling back. And so there wasn't an allocation in 2021. In 2022, you see allocations towards home buyer assistance, City of Flagstaff employer assisted housing, and then some housing development opportunity funding. I don't show you this slide to whine. I'm not whining. I could go back further. If we did a 20-year perspective, it would look a little bit different because we used to get an ongoing allocation of funds. I don't show you this slide to tell you it's not a priority of City Council. Affordable housing has remained a priority of City Council. The challenge is that there are a lot of demands on those general fund dollars. And City Council is faced with an incredibly difficult decision every year during the budget process of where those dollars go. And as you've seen in the past multiple weeks, there's a lot of competition for those dollars and a lot of really incredible community needs. So this is not a criticism of City Council and its allocation of dollars in any way, shape, or form. But it also tells the story of why at times we've really had a hard time, because it's difficult to fund a program and start it and then stop it and then start it and stop it, like we've done with home buyer assistance. And so that makes it difficult. And that's been one of our challenges over the years. I'm in my 21st year of working for the city, is not knowing from year to year what we're going to be able to do next year, not being able to depend on funding moving forward, and really just budgeting on an annual basis. Those are hard to say in order. So what's not on here, committee, is that there are monies. We do have that home buyer assistance money is a revolving fund. And so while it's not transfers from the general fund, as that money comes back in to the city, when homes are no longer owner occupied, refinanced for cash out, or sold, that money gets allocated back out into the community. So recently we had a contract coupled with the 2022 funding. We had about $85,000 of program income, is what it's called, to recycle back into the community. So like I said, this is not a criticism. It's just a clear picture of what our struggle has been from year to year. And that's one of the differences bond funding would make, is some predictability in programs, some predictability in deliverables. And we would be able to, once something is set up and running, keep it going over time, instead of at times programs go away and then we must re-ramp them back up, adapt them, etc. So I would also be remiss, I'm trying to create a complete picture. While the question was focused on general fund, I do want to point out that we recently we, the city, have one-time funding that's been allocated to housing. And this is reflective of council declaring housing emergency, recognizing its importance, and also one-time money coming our way from the federal government. So this is funding allocated from, we call it ARPA for short. It sounds like a seal bark, but it stands for American Rescue Plan Act. And last year, through the budget process, City Council allocated $500,000 to housing programs from this funding source. It says / general fund, talk to our accountant. And this funding was to help the city stabilize and make up for shortcomings that took place in the general fund because of COVID. And so that money was allocated to housing for fiscal year 21-22. And then we are also administering some funding for outside agencies. In the amounts you see here for these purposes: congregate care, housing assistance programs, and then aid to victim services nonprofits. Some pretty significant numbers here. Those are exciting. That's one-time funding. It's not money that's ongoing. It's not money we're going to see on a regular basis. And so we're actually in the process of having a grant process to award those funds to agencies out into the community. Also general fund, not necessarily for programs, but we do receive some money for staffing. Within the housing section, there are 30 positions total. And I know some people go, what, 30 positions? Let me tell you what we have. We do have 5 staff in community housing programs. That's everything from working with our developer incentives and negotiating with developers to include affordable housing. It includes management of our loan portfolio. When you have a revolving program and those loans are out there, it requires management of that as well. We have a number of contracts, not only with CDBG, which is a huge piece of the work of this program, but also contracts for our general fund money when we have it for home buyer assistance. We also have community involvement and planning, where we work with our partner agencies, with our local continuum of care. And that's also where our 10-year housing plan was written in-house. We did not use a consultant for that document, that we are actually quite proud of. There's a number of other.
Excuse me, Ms. Dar.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Can you switch the slide for us? I think it's
You know
a different
what? I
slide.
switched it on my screen and I didn't switch it on yours.
Yeah, we're still looking at the 10-year general fund transfers. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you, Chair. I'm gonna let you sit with this one for a second. My apologies. So as you see on here, we have that 500,000 for housing programs for ARPA / general fund, and then the funding for outside agencies. And then I say things like, as you can see, and then you can't. Thank you so much for stopping me. It's the danger of multiple screens. I can come back to this if there's questions as well. I'm going to move forward to staffing. There we go. So I talked about community housing program staff. We have 24 staff within our housing authority. Our housing authority in other states are quite often separate entities, separate legal entities. In Arizona, due to Arizona law, housing authorities are part of local government, either city, county, or our state has a very small one. Housing Authority oversees all of our public housing units. We own and operate 265 public housing units, and we also fee manage another 80. So 345 units that we oversee and manage. A good portion of that staff is maintenance staff, and I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize that. I believe Jesse Dominguez is in the room, who spent, I'm not going to say how many years, but the first number starts with a 5 and there is a digit after that, number of years working here at the Housing Authority, and retired as our maintenance director a while ago. And so we also have voucher programs in excess of 500 vouchers that we administer, with a variety of programs that go out into the community to assist people with housing. So that's what our Housing Authority staff does. That's where that bulk of that staff is. And then we have one that oversees both. That's me. I don't really fit in either box. I get to play with both. I'm actually super, super lucky with that. Of those positions, 25 of those positions are 100% grant funded. There's no general fund dollars going to those positions. There are 2 fully funded general fund positions, and 3 that are split between general fund and grant funds. And so while that number looks big, the bulk of it is Housing Authority, fully federally funded. It's treated as an enterprise fund within city budgeting. It's self-dependent. And then you see where the general funds come in for the issue. It's not an issue. Come into play for staffing. That's where my mind was going. And there was one more question that came to us in advance that I did not prepare a slide on because it has a super simple answer. The question was, how much money does the city receive from the Arizona Department of Housing for foreclosure prevention? And that answer is none. The state actually keeps the foreclosure prevention money itself. And it doesn't even go to Coconino County. That money is only accessible through applying through the state. It's not a replenishing fund. It's been funded 2 times. Most recently, it's funded with recovery funding. And trying to navigate it is not simple. I will put it that way. The county did receive, I also looked at eviction prevention funds. The county did receive a large allocation of one-time funding resulting from rescue plan funding in the amount of over $4 million. They continue to administer those dollars, but that's not just for Flagstaff, that's county-wide. And so they receive funding much, much smaller than that, several $100,000 a year usually for foreclosure prevention, but none of those dollars come to us as the city of Flagstaff. So that's the easy answer, is none. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or at least give it my best shot.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Starr. I know we do have some questions from the vice chair in the chat box. If you would like to take a look and then maybe respond them in order as they came in from the vice chair.
So
Okay.
give me 1 second. Some of these are particular to some of the slides that were in last presentation last week.
Okay.
And
Let me pull that up so I can see.
so
Yeah,
if
this is Shannon. I can read them for you.
if I reference a particular slide, can you pop that slide up?
If you give me a second to find that presentation and open it, I'm working on it.
You have almost an hour, I think.
I got it, Sarah.
Do you? Okay, thank you.
You should see it.
I see it, Justina.
Thank
So-
you, Justina.
Yep. Thank you.
Slide 44. That's not slide 44. That's slide 47. So yeah, slide 44.
Justina,
Okay.
will you put it in presentation mode, please? Some of those notes we didn't update. They got copied from an old presentation and we changed it.
So you've had eviction prevention programs in the past. I wonder if you have numbers on how many people have been served so far with eviction prevention. You've got $6 million here proposed for 2,000 families or households in this bond program. Have you been successful in getting that many folks served in the past? Do you have numbers on that?
Not off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay.
I can look
I
them
saw-
up, but I wasn't prepared for that question today. What I can tell you is, I'm looking for things as I'm talking.
Sure, and Sarah, we've got nothing but time. So if there's a question here that that you want to go back and look at, or you need to do research on, I learned a long time ago. It's okay to say I don't know, but I will find out for you.
Oh yeah, no, I have no problem saying I don't know. We've worked together before, Al, you know that.
Yeah.
I
So-
will tell you that those programs have proven critical in our community and have a long track record of success. It is important to point out that the city of Flagstaff does not and has not ever administered those programs. Those are administered through partnership with Coconino County Community Services. And it's been funded with CDBG dollars in the past. They also couple that with other funds. And a critical piece of eviction prevention, and quite often diversion programs as well, is the education that goes along with it, is the fact that households go through financial education. Those are the words I'm looking for. Through financial education in order to be able to make sure that this is not, if it's an ongoing situation, that it needs to be addressed, or is it really a one-off where someone got sick and was unable to work for 2 weeks, doesn't have sick pay, and was unable to make that rent payment. And so we can get you what's been served historically with CDBG dollars. Of course, that's going to ebb and flow because those dollars ebb and flow depending on what the county applies for, how much CDBG dollars we get, what other applications we have that year for funding. So I can tell you that the Housing Commission felt that with $6 million, they could serve 2,000 households. And if I divide that quickly.
It's already done. It's 3,000 a household.
There we go. Thank you. Oh, it
Yeah.
is done.
Yeah, it's on the side.
And
The
so
re-
what we find is that households often don't need an entire payment, that they have some, they need a piece. They just need to some to finish that payment. And so that 3,000 per household, I would say, is a high number. But looking into the future, given what we're facing, it may not be. And that's why I'm all about, let's make a realistic accomplishment number. And if we beat it, awesome. But not knowing what the future holds, this is what was presented here.
So next to that column, there's a revolving fund capability, and it says potentially. My next question was how does an account that's listed as potentially or possibly able to become revolving?
So right now it's not revolving, it's CDBG dollars, and it serves only low-income households. And so it's not really a possibility to create a structure where households would repay that assistance. Remember, with local funding comes local rules. And if we find that those needs in our community over the years we're having households, we turn households that make more than 80% away and say, I'm sorry, we cannot serve you. If we start serving households higher than 80% with local dollars, it's possible that we can structure that as a loan. With a low repayment. It's possible we could, depending on a number of different factors, structure it as part grant, part loan. It depends on what that looks like. That's why it says potentially, is because it depends on program dynamics and community needs moving forward.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and my next question's on slide 45.
How many units can be added? What is focus, rehab, or adding units?
Yeah, can you throw up slide 45?
Yeah, she's getting there.
So that's the RAD.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's the one that remains at 5 million all the way across. All of the options that the Housing Commission looked at, it didn't reduce as it went across. 5 million, 5 million, 5 million, yep. Right? So obviously you have $5 million in mind. Have you budgeted anything? Have you taken a look at what you would do with that in order to? I'm very concerned with adding units more than redevelopment. I know that redevelopment has to happen because in certain circumstances you have antiquated or outdated facilities. But my focus in this is I'll just be upfront with you. When it comes time to say yay or nay, those things that can be revolving funds that we can potentially use to generate more revenue on themselves, and anything that adds units. And so, do you have a plan yet for this? If you're able to get it.
Yes.
Okay. Let's hear it.
So can I tell you how many units? I can't. We have gone through an RSOQ, a request for statement of qualifications, to select a development partner to undertake this with us. And we are in the process of negotiating a pre-development agreement with that development entity. The development entity actually specializes in affordable housing development and has done all of the RAD conversions within our state. And so I'm all about adding units. We have, if anyone is familiar with our housing authority properties, Jesse could probably tell you better than me. Seiler Homes on the east side, Brannon Homes on the west side. They are built at a very low density. They're all single-story units. So right now we have 265 of those units. We do have about 36 units scattered throughout the community in various neighborhoods. But those two main developments, even if we built a second story, we'd be doubling essentially the number of units that we have. I can't tell you those numbers yet because we're at the beginning of this process. The bulk of the money is not coming from us. This is a very small drop in the bucket, but gives us a different seat at the table in related to having more say into what goes into these projects. And not projects, not calling public housing projects, but the development projects themselves. And so having some fund ability to be able to have some gap financing. Usually these deals are done with a minimum of 5 different funding sources, and they're difficult. There'll be tax credit funding, there'll be public housing funding. To have something that we can access locally to close the gap on some of those is critical. And so while it's not revolving, it is a permanent investment and is going to result in hundreds of more units than we have right now.
So my next question is about Section 8. Is RH2 basically what I'm talking about doing here? Is that to create a
landlord incentive? No. To make up a rental amount? No. All of our Section 8 money comes from the feds. This is to partner with tax credit developers. Quite often, again, similar scenario with the one above, but quite often a tax credit developer is seeking a small contribution from a municipality. And it used to be a requirement within the essentially grant application, the QAP, the Qualified Allocation Plan, which is what ADO, the Arizona Department of Housing, puts out to guide the application process for those tax credits. And so we are often asked for a contribution towards those. We've done it in the past with the small amounts of money that we've had, and those are repaid. They are interest-only payments for the life of the affordability within a balloon payment at the end. And if folks are unsure of what tax credit housing is and how that funding structure works, I have a couple slides I could pull up to walk folks through it. It is a concept I did not cover last week. It's not something that we do, but if the committee would like to have that information, I could find it fairly quickly.
Ms. Starr, that'd probably be appropriate since, we have the rest of the time until 5:30 for this discussion. So that would be great.
I am working on it right now. Is there a question I can answer while I'm looking?
Well, my next one was this morning, I saw a press release that talked about the Department of Housing having some $40 million to spread around. Have we targeted any of that? And do you think that there's a share in there for Flagstaff? It's supposed to be rural housing.
So I don't know, but I do know. We'll have to compete for any of those dollars. And so the state will, it's not going to come to us without an identified project, without identified, and it's not going to come to the city of Flagstaff. Very, very unlikely. Those monies flow to housing providers in the community. The state is putting out RFPs for some of the funding, but there isn't any warning about what that money is going to be for. So it's very difficult to prepare a project. It's almost like you have to have a menu of things ready to go and then apply for that funding. And again, it's competitive. We will compete with the rest of the state in order to access those dollars. So could money come our way? Sure, it absolutely could. Do we know what that's going to be yet? No.
Do you know how to access it?
It will be through the state issuing RFPs for us to respond to.
Okay.
I can't go knock on their door and ask for a check. It's not how it works.
Sarah, this is Devonna. I can give a little bit of insight if you want.
I would be fine with that. Thank you.
So when that press release was issued for the $40 million, I actually contacted my colleague at the Department of Housing to ask if more money was coming out, and it is not. It is the same $40 million that an RFP was issued for in December. So there are developers that have already been working on projects to apply for that money. And it's my understanding that they expect that money will be spent with the projects in the queue that they think are coming in.
Thanks, Devonna.
Thank you, Devonna.
All right, I'm turning my microphone off. It's somebody else's turn. Thank you for indulging me.
I did not have time to make that phone call. So thank you, Devonna. I appreciate you pitching in there. Can you see a slide that says tax credit 101?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So I haven't done these in a bit, so I'll try not to stumble through them. But so tax credit housing, low income housing tax credits, we call LIHTC here in California and some other states. It's called Section 42 housing. So if you've heard that, this is the same thing. Why are things in housing land called Section 42 and Section 8 and that? That's because it literally references the section of federal code where the program's contained. So I always wondered that, and I had to start working in housing to figure it out. It is the largest affordable housing funding source in the nation. It was started under the Reagan administration and has been the most successful historically to date. They're built by private developers. Those private developers can be a nonprofit. We have nearly 800 units in Flagstaff, and they serve 60% AMI and below. It is administered by the Arizona Department of Housing, and it has a minimum affordability time period of 15 years. That's per federal regulations. The Arizona Department of Housing asks for a minimum affordability period of 30 years. And prior to them putting that requirement in, we locally were asking for a minimum commitment of 30 years if the city was party to the deal at all. We have partnered in multiple complexes around town over the years. So how in the world does this work? Don't squint at your screen because I've broken this down into separate slides. So this is the overall flow I'm going to break down and chat with you about. It's interesting to note that the tax credit program is not a HUD program. It's an IRS program. So how does this work? So tax credits are used by developers to raise essentially cash for building costs. Because affordable housing costs the same to build as fair market apartments, but the rents are lower. So the federal government allocates tax credits to each state. It is then the state's responsibility to come up with an allocation strategy in order to get those credits into the hands of developers. That is called what I've mentioned earlier, the Qualified Allocation Plan. We call it the QAP. And in essence, it is a grant application. It is an application for funding. It's incredibly extensive. They're very expensive to complete. And developments, LIHTC developments are not done by folks for fun. They are done by developers that specialize in this business. It is an expensive business. It is a profitable business, and it also provides affordable housing and community throughout the nation. So developers apply for the tax credits, and those projects are selected based on how the application meets what the state is looking for in that QAP document. So then, oh, there we go. They apply for them. when the tax credits are awarded, the developers sell the credits to investors who can claim them on their federal or state income tax returns. I'll talk about the difference with the state one in just a second. I'm going to leave it with federal for the moment. So that tax credit is sold by the developer to major corporations. I've seen deals with American Express, JP Morgan Chase. We've seen, it used to be back in the day, oil companies we would see purchase these credits, and they can use them over a 10-year time period. Those credits sell, it depends. I hate that answer, but it does. It depends on economic conditions at the time. Sometimes they're as low as 70 to 80 cents on the dollar. We've also seen them as high as 98 to 99 cents on the dollar. So it depends on economic conditions and what the corporations are willing to pay. So that gives the developer an influx of cash with which to build. Now, very, very rarely does that money, it's not enough to cover all of the development costs. And we see other funds coming into, it's called funding layering, or a lasagna, if you will. You'll have your major funding source for tax credit development, and then you'll see perhaps home money from HUD come in, or a local funding source come in. You'll see some owner carry, where the corporations that build these will carry some of that debt as well. And sometimes some traditional financing comes into the mix as well. So that money allows developers to build and maintain with lower rents. And so those rents come out on an annual basis. They are designed to be affordable to households at the different income levels under 60% AMI. And that is the very quick and dirty of how LIHTC works. So it's in that funding lasagna where that local funding could be utilized and has been utilized in the past, where it can make a difference to a project being successful or not being successful. It also makes the application stronger because it shows that our local government is willing to, we need this, and we're willing to be a partner in this development in our community ourselves. And so that's a very simplified version of this, but in essence, that's how tax credits work.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Starr, for the going over LIHTC. As you said, it's a very important item that helps to bring affordable housing into our community, especially with, I believe you said 800 units. And there's 2 projects I'm aware of that are using that funding source to bring more housing to our community, if not more than 2. So with that, we're going to ask you some more questions. I'm going by the chat box. I'm going to turn it over to one of our committee members, Mr. Austin Kerr, to ask his question.
So Al already asked my question, and it was answered. Sorry.
No worries.
All right, no worries. Great. Next one, and please either do the raise hand or put your question in the chat box. Mr. Moore, go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Hey, Sarah, just a quick question. If you could provide some context as to, it seems like a lot of the money is going towards emergency housing versus the other 2 buckets. What was the reasoning with the Housing Commission to do that?
I am looking, Justina, would you please put up the final recommendation slide with everything in one spot, please? Thank you. As she pulls this up, I should start calling her Vanna White for this one. And Tad. Yep, the last one. Thank you so much. I don't think we are. We have 15,000 in emergency. I'm only looking at recommendation 1. So we have, I'm sorry. I promise you can trust me with money. Don't hold that 15 against me. when it's not. It's really
Sarah,
17.
I can speak to this. I can speak to
Excellent.
this a tiny bit
Go
if you'd
for it.
like.
Thank you.
Sure. So in order to create these recommendations, what happened was that the Housing Commission broke out into working groups in order to assess what was proposed last time when COVID hit and we didn't end up having measures on the ballot. And so what ended up happening is there were 3 working groups, one for emergency, one for rental, and one for ownership. And the individuals in those groups met and had conversations about what our community needs, and we went from there. And so there was no limitation as to, you know, how much money each working group was to ask for or what programs or activities should be recommended. And so that's what you see in front of you today.
Thank you. That answers perfectly.
Okay, thank you. And sorry about that with the mute button. Another committee member, Mr. Ron Ghetto, has a question with his hand raised.
Thank you, Charlie. On Tuesday, the city council voted for a 10-year housing plan. I can't tell you I know much about their decisions and their goals and objectives over those 10 years, but it seems like we should try and tie your presentation and your priorities together with city council, so we know what we have city council supporting us on. Can you give us any color as to what their priorities were in the plan and how that might shed light on some of the things we're looking at in terms of your objectives, please?
Absolutely. Justina, I'm thinking we had that in last week's presentation. Did I dream that? I know we did a cross-reference of bond.
We did. Let me pull that up.
Thank you. Thank you. While she's doing that, I will say absolutely this is tied together. And so actually one of the recommendations in the housing plan is to pursue a bond measure. That was something all of the working groups noticed as they looked at things as we went through them, is that funding has been a barrier to us moving forward in a significant way for a very long time. So what you have in front of you are bond recommendations tied to the 10-year housing plan. There are 4 categories within the recommendations: create, connect, preserve, and protect. And so we have incentivize the creation of affordable units through various programs and mechanisms. We have that's tied to the bond recommendations. Create a dedicated funding source for affordable housing. That's what we're speaking of doing with bond funding. Identify ongoing resource opportunities. You saw the importance of that ongoing piece as we looked at that 10-year perspective of funding. Explore regulatory efficiency and cost-saving practices. That's part of the recommendations and the 10-year plan, specifically prioritizing the development of City of Flagstaff owned land and designated for affordable housing. That's where that $5 million we were talking about a little bit earlier comes in. And then I believe there's some more on the next slide, is reduce homelessness in the Flagstaff community, which is the EH recommendations. Implement a framework centered on equity as we move forward. And so that's where you see the recommendations not decreasing across, or not, nothing goes away in that. And so we're addressing the whole continuum. And then expand efforts to preserve existing housing stock, continue homeowner rehabilitation, and then if possible, acquire and rehabilitate already built properties for affordable housing projects when financially feasible. And Justina, if you could go back to the slide just before the one where we tied these 2 things together, it also talks about the Econa study that was done in 2017. And one of the recommendations done by a third party was the creation of an ongoing funding source for our community. And so I know that she has a delay. So I'll just talk about it. It was, so not only the 10-year housing plan, and not only the Icona study, it goes back further. Slide 38, there we go. That Icona plan specifically called for pursuing bond issue for affordable and workforce housing. It specifically talks about recapturing and recycling public investments, and explore options for reoccurring local and private funding sources. So it's absolutely tied to the 10-year plan and also other planning documents within our community. Thank you for the question. Did I answer it? Does it make sense?
Yeah, no, I think you did a good job. It's just a lot of demand, a lot of money, and I just want to make sure we're earmarking it, you know, specifically to the goals and objectives of the city council, because they've spent a lot more time on this issue than any of us, except perhaps for Al.
Absolutely, Ron. And that's an excellent point. Council has also seen these recommendations because we talked about them in 2020. And then when they restarted us to do it again, we talked about them. So they've been encouraging with it. And we did make sure, we didn't make sure that it lined up, but our community need is so clear. When we started out on the creation of the 10-year plan, it was kind of a no surprises thing for housing staff because we've worked in it so long. We know what the conditions are. There are some surprises we found in there, especially through the community participation, but our overall local conditions are well known and documented in different places. And so I'm super happy to have the 10-year plan, have it adopted by city council, because it really is the accumulation of all of our planning documents, city council direction, community direction, and effort in one community facing document. So thank you for helping me point out those linkages.
All right, thank you, Ms. Dar. I'm not seeing any hand raising or questions in the chat box at the moment. I do like to make a comment concerning if there is a possibility through this bond, if it does get moved forward and it does get passed by the voters, whatever it is. I know there is a huge need that I've heard from the residents here in Flagstaff, whether it's the realtors or the builders or et cetera, that there needs to be this revolving fund that seem like it just, you know, takes care of itself and moves on and helps to pay forward to help the next person. I think that, you know, that's very applicable and that a lot of the residents would like to see, and it makes sense. And to have this type of revolving fund, it gets paid into and then helps the next person. We have had fund of that sort here in the city, but it's been so limited that the requests and the matrix to make it work for anybody, no one really took advantage of it, which is not the point of having such a fund. That no one uses it because it's just not easily be done. So with that, we do have another question from one of our committee members, Mr. Kerr. So go ahead.
Hi, y'all. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the chart with all of we had the 50 million, the 40 million, and the 30 million. And I remember last week, Sarah, you saying that we can't go below 30 million. Like 30 million seems to be like the minimum. But with all of the other things, even just from when we did stormwater and wastewater and the public safety, and we haven't even touched sustainability yet. I don't want to see any of this fail. And I'm curious if there is any other, like if there's a recommendation number 4 or 5 that can help kind of contribute to that rotating plan that Charlie talked about, because once the money's in, it seems like it's good. Like it's just going to keep rotating in and out, which is excellent. So I just wanted to hear any insight you may have about any other potential recommendations. I don't know. I've just been mulling this over all week, and that's what I kept coming up thinking about.
Sure. Thank you for the question. You can go below this. I'm representing the Housing Commission, and these are their recommendations. So it is at staff's request, actually, that they prepared the different funding amounts. They started at the 50. And we know that there are lots of demands on this and wanted to be able to present what it would look like if it was less funding. It is absolutely City Council's decision on how much to put for what activity on the ballot. And so I'm simply representing the Housing Commission's recommendations, and that's where you see the 40, 50, and 30. I will say that the funds do revolve. We have successful revolving fund programs, especially with homeownership programs. We see an average of 7 to 10 years before those dollars come back to us. So having funding that we can continue to fund over the years instead of have a smaller money amount that we lend out and then we wait for it to come back in. And those repayments also vary depending on the market. When the mortgage market was super hot pre-2008 and people were refinancing their homes and pulling cash out, we would have lots of amounts coming back to us to repeat with. When things crashed in 2008 and nothing was moving financially, we did not have repayments coming back in and we did not have money to cycle back out. And so that's the ebb and flow we see with those repayment programs, and not only with homebuyer assistance, but with owner-occupied housing rehabilitation, same thing. We're dependent on the market and people making those choices. Now, with that said, that's how our programs are structured now as far as they revolve. And so I'm sorry, I got distracted by the chat and people being excited. I didn't know what the fire chief shared is possible either, and it's killing me not to try it, to be able to zoom in. So we could set up these revolving programs differently. We can set it up according to guidance from the Housing Commission and City Council and also community needs where small payments are remade. I don't recommend a payment structure for low income households very often because they quite often don't have the finances to do that. But again, local money, local rules. If households above low income are able to be assisted, then we could structure those programs differently where we would have a predictable repayment source coming in.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Great question.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Starr. Mr. Moore.
Thanks, Charlie. Quick question, just as far as all of these, we see sort of a higher overview of what the bond recommendations are. Are there any plans or budget in place for basically PR that would be necessary for all of that? Because it seems like in recent history, the best laid plans kind of fail because of NIMBYism, for lack of a better word, for resistance from the community. So is there any sort of PR to teach people about the importance of housing affordability, how it affects, reduction in crime rates, reduction in recidivism rates, reduction in teen pregnancy, increasing in job stability, increasing in graduation rates, like all those other things that are larger community issues that can sort of help get some of these through? Because the fear that I have is we have this bond money in this bond capacity, but then we just hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and then nothing actually can come to fruition.
City Council has allocated some money to us to do a small amount in order to do some community education about the role affordable housing plays in our community. That is also a recommendation within the 10-year plan. Activities like that are often not eligible for bond funding. And I know if I misstep, Mr. Chatter is going to turn his camera on and he'll explain it better than me. But things like that are not a bond fundable activity. So could it be built into these programs? Absolutely. Homebuyer purchase assistance loan program revolving. It can't 100% be loan funding because we have to prepare documents and we have to do recording fees, that type of thing. We know the administration of these to be a minor amount, but we can't program bond funding specifically for advertising, but I do believe like I said, we have a little bit now, but we can also do not education, but we can do outreach with like eviction prevention. We can do outreach to our local partner agencies. This is what we have, that type of thing. But as far as a PR campaign, it's not a bond fundable piece.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Ms. Starr. Another committee member, Mr. Ghetto, go ahead.
Ron, you're muted.
Ron Ghetto, I think you're still on mute, sir.
Yeah.
Sorry
you're
about that.
muted.
I'm sorry about that. So looking at recommendations 1, 2, and 3, are those all or nothing? Or if we were to really delve into these individually and educate ourselves on each and every one of these items, are we in a position where we could choose different levels of funding from different recommendations and come up with our own bond totals?
I'm going to rely on perhaps the city manager to help me with that one, but I will tell you, this is the Housing Commission recommendations as I was asked to present to you. I'm not sure how the role of the committee works with something like that. Greg, can you help me out?
Yep, thank you. And thank you for the question. I think the committee exercises a lot of discretion in this, but I think Sarah raises a good point. You know, what's coming to you has already been vetted with the commission. And I think the priorities that the committee are seeing here are reflected in the number 1, number 2, or number 3. In other presentations, we've had priorities as to what you're asking about, Ron, which is, you know, actual line items, you know, what project is more important than the other. Here, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but the prioritization is a little bit more reflected in the 3 categories. All that said, if the committee was to decide that some of these programs are more, you know, worthy than others or should garner more support, I think there's room for discussion of that. I guess I would ask that when that sort of deliberation occur, that it be done with the assistance of housing staff to provide guidance and help inform that discussion if that's the route that the committee wants to go. Does that help? Sarah, was that okay?
That was, thank you for that. I did want to point out that it was very important to the Housing Commission that the recommendations cover the housing continuum from emergency to homeownership, so that it allows us to address multiple areas of housing within the community to better create those, to connect those stairs that we saw throughout the housing continuum. So thank you for your help, Greg.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Starr, and thank you, Mr. Clifton. I'll just make a comment. I know one of our committee members that we have on board with us is Ms. House, and if I remember right, Ms. House was the vice chair of that Housing Commission at the time. As Mr. Clifton has said and Ms. Starr has said, this process, you know, with the recommendation, went through a very robust discussion. Believe for quite a few months. And so this is not at a whim type of recommendation that was put forward. And so I see Ms. House with her hand up. I'm going to ask Mr. Dominguez to be patient. Since we're on this particular topic, I'll let Ms. House speak and then I'll get back to you, Mr. Dominguez. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. I also wanted to acknowledge Devonna McLaughlin is also on the Housing Commission and may be able to speak into it. But yes, you were absolutely right, Chair. I was the vice chair when we were first putting together the bond recommendations, and am the chair now as we're presenting these. And really, the only thing I wanted to add to the conversation is I'm really actually very grateful for the questions that many of you are asking, because they were some of the questions that we were sure that we were bringing into the conversation when we were coming up with these recommendations. One of the things that was very important to me, and I know was very important to much of the commission, and if not all of the commission, was ensuring that we were getting into more specifics, that we were providing these ranges similarly to the first bond recommendation that we took before council, which was I want to say almost unanimously, if not unanimously supported, until COVID happened, unfortunately. But we just wanted to make sure that we were addressing those concerns that arose with the first time the bond measure went forward and unfortunately did not pass, to these new recommendations, ensuring that we're reaching into all the different aspects of the housing continuum, and ensuring that we're addressing the concerns that came from that first bond measure, and ensuring that we are foreseeing and thinking about the types of questions that you all were asking today. So I'm sure that we are happy to continue and thinking through the questions that you're asking, but I just wanted to note that they were also questions that we very much took into consideration when coming up with this. So thank you.
No, thank you, Ms. House, for those comments. So with that, Mr. Dominguez, I'll get back to you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Sarah and her crew. I know the last time that we did this, the last bond, and staff, of course, they worked so hard to try to not to promote it, but just to give everybody a transparency as to what was being asked. So kudos to Sarah and staff. I think Kara sort of answered my question was, did we learn from the last bond issue? I know that Sarah came out to 1 million meetings, and she didn't see her family for probably 6 months or so. But anyways, that I think that she worked really hard, and I know that she also had debriefing. So I'm assuming that's what Carol was talking about. I just want to make sure that we're successful this time, and that we didn't forget to cross the T and dot the I. And I know they did it the last time, but still, for some reason, there was, what was it, 2 or 3% that said no. So that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dominguez. Any other of the committee members have a question by raising their hand or again, putting something in the chat box? We still got some time, and so.
Chair, if you'd like, I could review what has changed between last time and this time.
Before we start that, a hand raised did come in from Mr. Moore, and we'll take his question and then we'll go over that. That'd be very, we have time, so let's cover all our bases while we're still on this topic.
Thank you, Chair Odegaard. It wasn't really a question, just a quick comment. You know, a lot of the slides that we looked at previously were from the last couple of years, and I think it's sometimes hard to quantify just how bad the affordability issue is here. So just to give some perspective, we just ran numbers for just January of this year, and the median single-family home price for the greater Flagstaff area is over $700,000 now. So when we're talking about affordability, it's not even affordability for entry-level workers or for it's for nurses, it's for doctors, it's for electricians, it's for plumbers, it's for like all of the people that we absolutely rely on. So I honestly don't think that there's more of a critical issue than housing affordability. And I know that sometimes we hear housing affordability and all we're thinking about is like rental assistance for, you know, those making 80% or less of the median income. But it's a catastrophic issue here in Flagstaff, and something that I think the committee here needs to take with as just the utmost importance. That was all I had to say. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moore. Very well spoken on how the crisis, I guess, you know, crisis. That's why a housing emergency was passed by a previous council body, and that was a couple years ago. And the numbers we're facing today are not near what it was 2 years ago. So thank you. And Ms. Dar.
All right, so a quick review of what's changed. We actually worked very hard to address the concerns that we learned from in 2018. That's one of the first things the Housing Commission looked at when the Housing Commission was created is what happened with Proposition 422. What could we do differently? So just a quick review of what has changed. It is 4 years. It's hard to think of it being 4 years ago. In my head, it feels like 2 and also 1,000 at the same time. So last time we were late in starting the process with bond preparation. We were late to the game. The direction to staff came months later than the others that were working on the items. And also the framework for recommendations was in place early this time. We've been working on this since 2019 in preparation for 2020 and then COVID. So also different is council support previously was divided. City council support on affordable housing has been robust lately, for lack of a better word. City council established the Housing Commission in 2019 and declared the housing emergency in 2020. And they have expressed support multiple times for the recommendations coming from the Housing Commission. Also, one of the challenges with 422 was a lack of clarity surrounding oversight and accountability. The Housing Commission ordinance, the ordinance that created the Housing Commission specifically mentions oversight responsibility of bond funds. We know who that body is. We know what seats are sitting on that body. We know there are industry representatives and low-income representatives and general community representatives there. And so that oversight and accountability is clearer this time in place through the Housing Commission. One of the other criticisms in the past was there wasn't a lot of specificity in programs and activities with predicted outcomes. So this time what you see in those recommendations are specific activities rather than we're going to work in housing and we're going to address homeownership, rental, and emergency. You now see those broken out with attached specifics to them. And then this was last week's presentation. So the 10-year housing plan, which is connected to these recommendations, was scheduled for approval on Tuesday. Now it's been approved as of Thursday. And we do have also a rewrite of our incentive policy underway. The other thing that I think is changing is that I'm seeing a growing community interest and also understanding of affordable housing challenges. I'm getting different questions in the community today than I did 5 years ago. So thanks for the opportunity to review those items.
All right, thank you, Ms. Starr. We do have a question from our Vice Chair, Mr. White.
Thanks. Sarah, I just reviewed the publicity pamphlet for 422, and there was a very specific category on that publicity brochure that said, how will the money be spent? And there were 2 bullet points underneath it that were indeed vague at that point in time. I'm urging you, if with whatever we come back and suggest to council or whatever council puts forward, that that you be very, very specific in that category in any publicity that you put out.
Thank you. That is our intent.
Yeah. I mean, it was very, very vague before, and people said, no, if we don't know how it's going to be spent, we're not going to vote for it. So thanks.
All right, thank you. With that, I think we're not seeing any more questions. Ms. Starr or Mr. Clifton, do you have any final comments before I'll turn it over to the committee itself with any closing marks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sarah Dar, for your presentation, and thank you to all the committee members who have been asking thoughtful questions. This is the second of this particular topic that has spanned 2 meetings, of course, but also extra time in those meetings, an hour and a half last time and close to an hour and a half this time. I mentioned that because the committee's been very generous with their time and their involvement in this, and the idea of adjourning early at the committee's request would not be looked upon poorly, but actually would probably be well deserved, but that's a committee decision to make. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clifton. Any closing marks, Mr. Ms. Dar, from you or your team at all before we turn it back into the committee?
I only have a thank you. I thank you for the time you dedicated to learning about housing in our community and the thoughtful questions. I never know what's going to come forward, and I appreciate the patience, as I didn't always necessarily have the information at my fingertips. We are grateful for the opportunity, especially I get to say this on behalf of the Housing Commission, for your consideration of their recommendations. So thanks for the time.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you to everybody on your team. And so with that, Vice Chair White, do you have any
Well, I did
closing
pop,
comments?
I did pop up another question. Since we have some time, and I don't know if everybody wants to get out of here, I can ask this question some other time. But can you pop slide 46 back up? And do you guys want to go back into another question?
Yeah, go right ahead. Again, we have time. And then after Vice Chair, one of our other committee members does have a hand raised. So Mr. Ghetto. So after this, we'll answer any questions or any comments from Mr. Ghetto.
So let's see, where was it? It was own number 2. My question was 125 units created. I appreciate the revolving fund capacity being there. That makes it more easily acceptable for me. But my question is, what are we trying to accomplish there? Well, 125 housing units. Are those apartments? Are you still trying to do single family detached? And is there anything? Is there a goal set for those 125 units? What you're expecting to get for your $5 million?
So it was important for the Housing Commission to have activities throughout the housing continuum, and this one is not focused on rental. It is in the homeownership category. And so that acquisition assistance for land or units to create homeownership opportunities is intended for us to be able to partner with private developers. It's not necessarily us doing it. If Kara, the chair of the Housing Commission, or Justina wishes to speak to this, I'd be happy to let them. I did not sit in on this committee's creation. But that is the intent, is for us to have the ability to encourage developers to include affordable homeownership opportunities in the developments that they're building. And so what does that look like? I don't know what it looks like. I know what we've done in the past with it, and some of it has been single family, some of it is condos. This would give us the ability to partner with private developers in a way we haven't had before, again, because of that limited and unpredictable funding.
Okay.
And I think that 125 is with the first round of it, sure, but of course, with revolving, those numbers would be higher.
Yeah. Okay. I'll reserve comment on it. I think, yeah, that's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. And since we're kind of on this topic, I'd like to see if at the time of the commission at the time that presented the 3 items for consideration for dollar amounts and what was in those, is either Ms. House or Ms. McLaughlin would like to make any comment at all at this time.
Unfortunately, Chair Devana had to depart and is no longer with us. She's with us. She's just not in this meeting anymore.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Ms. House, do you have any comment?
You know, I was not on this working group coming up with these numbers, so I don't want to risk misrepresenting where they came from. I think the one thing I would add, though, is just as Sarah was saying, each of the groups really did delve into the numbers when coming up with the total number of housing units created or the total number of households served, looking at what the minimum supports or whether it was down payment assistance or rental assistance averages or any of those numbers, we got very specific within each of the working groups, looking at what the averages were, updating our numbers actually to match what current market rates and impacts are. So when we see that number 125 with that initial $5 million and the revolving fund capability, what that's saying is that there's a certain number that was assigned for each household potentially. And it carries across into each of the categories that we're talking about. So there's a lot more specificity that went into the creation of these numbers than I think is really possible at all to show on each of these charts. The team did amazing work in reflecting what we talked about on these, but I promise you, if all of the conversation and specific numbers and different areas that we looked at was on this chart, it would not fit on your screen. So I just want to emphasize that those are things that we were thinking about, and it was a really good question, Vice Chair White.
Thanks.
I did miss an important word in speaking to this one, and that is incentives. These would be based within our incentive program in order to encourage developers to include affordable housing. I realized when I finished speaking that I did not include the incentive piece there.
All right, thank you, everybody. So back to Mr. Ghetto.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something and sort of confirm what Vice Chair White had to say about educating the voters. The nature of a bond issue and going to the polls is it's going to either pass or it's not. And sitting here these last two sessions, it's clear we have tremendous needs for housing. I'm really concerned that after we agree on what prioritizing those needs and quantifying those needs and bringing it to the city council and ultimately to our citizen neighbors, we have to make sure these are marketed correctly and we educate people correctly. And these are very nuanced things. So I just hope we have a lot of time to do that and to do it really effectively, because I'm concerned that you know, it's a yes or a no, and you'll drown if it's a no matter what dollar amount we all agree to. So best of luck. We'll all be here supporting you, but it's a big rock to push up a steep hill.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ghetto. I would like to ask the city manager, Mr. Clifton, kind of answers. I know he answered a little bit to that. I was just wanted to maybe Mr. Clifton to talk to the committee members of what tools the city can do, you know, not to encourage, because the city really cannot encourage itself, but to bring education to the residents of, you know, why is the question being asked of the residents here in Flagstaff?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. There's actually a lot we can do in the arena of informing and educating. We do have a deadline to meet in that regard. Once the ballot questions are set, we do not spend any more tax-funded resources on this. There are some exceptions to that, you know, informing, answering questions and so forth. But by and large, once the measures are set, staff has to back off on this. And so, but between now and then, there are a lot of things that can and will take place. Just to illustrate with some quick examples, next week, we will be producing a video internally, one that this group has already seen, the committee, that is, you know, what is a bond and why is this committee formed? What has, you know, the council request for this committee and the three categories that are being considered for possible bond measures, very high level introductory stuff. That will be followed with a video involving Rick Tatter, where we will dig deeper, pardon me, into the substance of the bonds and how they impact how they are structured within the property tax revenue and impact of those potential debt issuances and so forth. A little bit more into the weeds on that part. I think we could all expect similar outreach efforts as we go forward with respect to the substantive matters that have been before this committee and will continue to come to this committee. We have yet to hear from sustainability. And our consultants will give us some important guidance as to this outreach, but I think there's a lot we can do internally. I just got a message of bad network quality, so I hope you're still hearing me. There's a lot we can do internally until such time as the bond measures are set. And then at that point, we'll be looking to other folks in the community and hopefully some on this committee to help advance that message. Thank you, Chair, for the question.
No, thank you, Mr. Clifton. And I know in the past, like, the road transportation tax and some of the questions that was asked in 2018, there was a group of private citizens that took their own money to try to educate the populace why something should have a yes to. Maybe there could be something like that this year, but I don't know, and I guess we'll see how it plays out as November gets closer. And we as a committee has not yet decided, what are our recommendations yet either. And so with that, not seeing any more questions or comments, just on this topic concerning, dollars for housing, especially trying to bring housing to residents here in Flagstaff. I remember one instance when I was on the city council where there was an opportunity to bring housing to our community that would provide that affordability aspect to it. And we as a council body did not have the dollars to partner with somebody to help bring that type of housing here in Flagstaff. The dollars weren't there, and city budget dollars are very tight in the general fund. I remember squabbling over $5,000 or $10,000 when the need is $1 million. And so this is a very important topic. And again, I really appreciate everyone's time, the committee members, the city staff members in our weekly meetings. It's a huge effort and a huge time sacrifice among everyone's lives to participate in this. And I know everyone is so appreciative to this. And so with that, our next meeting is again on Thursday next week at 4 o'clock with sustainability presentation. And so looking forward to that. And again, thank you, everybody, and everyone have a good night.
Thank you all. Have a good